Welcome in to a new season of Three True Values. That's right, the season tips off in college basketball less than a month from now. That means that we have to talk through our preseason conference breakdown series. This week's episode will include the ACC, the Missouri Valley Conference, and the A10. We'll get some help from some experts along the way. In the second segment, we will have Conor O'Neill of Devils Illustrated and Deacons Illustrated. He'll break down what we should expect from those two programs, Duke and Wake Forest. All things going on Tobacco Road. And here in the first segment, we're going to walk you through the rest of the ACC. Then in the third segment, that's right, we're bringing him back to talk Missouri Valley and A10 on threes. Nick Schultz will join us as he does each preseason to break down those two mid-major conferences. Who can come out of there alive? Who's going to get those NCAA tournament bids? We'll talk about that in the third segment. Just to set the tone for you here over the next month or so, we are going to have plenty content on the way. Not just in the preseason, but throughout the year, now that we are starting a new season from scratch. We will, on Tuesdays, be alternating. We'll be talking a little bit of recruiting. We will talk about the NBA draft prep with Jamie Shaw from Rivals. He'll be joining us each Tuesday in a couple of series that we're going to break down throughout the season. And then on Thursday, as always, we will have Three True Values here for you at noon. We'll break down the results of the week, the big storylines. We'll get you prepared for the games coming up over the course of the next week. And as the season goes on, we will be doing mailbag episodes. We will talk through bracketology as things shift up and down the board. We are going to keep you covered in all facets of the game here, talking from high school recruiting to the college game on the hardwood and getting you ready for the NBA draft. So you're not going to want to miss it here on this channel. We will keep you covered throughout the season. In this preseason series in particular, as I said, this week we are starting with the ACC and a couple of mid-major conferences. Next week, we will be doing the Big 12 and the Mountain West conferences. We'll be breaking down those two, what you can expect across those conferences. On October 23rd, we're going to bring you the Big 10 preview and talk some Big East hoops as well. And then on October 30th, we will be knocking on the door of the season. We're going to talk SEC and the American. We'll have guests along the way as we do this week to help us break it down to get an inside look at a few programs across the country. So you're not going to want to miss that. Be sure to tune in to each of them. But if you follow one conference in particular, one team in particular, you're going to definitely want to make sure that you are tuned in for that episode. So with all the introduction out of the way, with all of the lineup for not just this episode, but the year in the books, let's go ahead. Let's start talking about the ACC. There's a lot to like here in this conference, a conference that is rebuilding that we talked about through the offseason. Has invested heavily in the coaching ranks. We're seeing these teams say, hey, look, we're starting to fall behind. We can't let this happen. The ACC is a proud traditional conference, basketball powerhouses from top to bottom, but it hasn't looked like that recently. They're looking to turn this around. A lot of new faces, a lot of familiar faces at big programs or trying to build up programs along the way here. Really, really interested to see how this season plays out. If we're talking about the top of the conference, talking about the teams that are considered national title contenders, Duke is going to be right up at the front of that list. We'll talk about them a lot more in the next segment, but they do bring in the boozers. Obviously, John Shire, I have great respect for how he has developed as a coach over recent years. I think that they're going to be one of the teams that we follow throughout the season when we talk about the top of the rankings. Louisville gets in the mix after a just huge overachievement last year from Pat Kelsey and his group of, new players. It was a complete overhaul there of the roster. He now has returning talent. He has some five-star talent off the recruiting trail, more transfers coming in to make a big impact. Their guard depth is among the best in the entire country. We have Mikel Brown, who is really a breakout guy who continues to move up boards, who looks like he could be a potential top 5 NBA draft pick if things go well this season. You pair him with Isaac McNeely, an established guard who has had success in the ACC. I like that a lot. Ryan Conwell joins Adrian Woolley, who was one of the most underrated guys in the transfer portal. He can shoot the ball, he can play defense. A lot to like in that guard room that kind of extends to the wings as well, depending on how you classify different players. Now, the question for this team at Louisville is going to be the front court. Sanandra Frew comes in from overseas. There's going to be a lot of expectation placed on him when he was not as much of a known commodity as some of the other international players that we've seen. There are a lot of people who are high on him, a lot of people who feel like he's one of the late surgers in this kind of class, if we want to talk about the international prospects coming in the same way that we do recruits or transfers. But there's still some unknown there, something left to prove. Of course, it was big to get Ali Khalifa's eligibility reinstated. That gives them some depth at the center position, also provides them kind of a floor as they look to build in that spot. But I do think that regardless of those front court questions, you have to put them in the mix as a team that at the very least is an outside contender to join the national title conversation, because there's so much talent in that backcourt and a lot to like about the way that Pat Kelsey is building his program. As we kind of move down into the borderline top 25 teams, we get our North Carolinas. Big season for Hubert Davis. There has been massive investment into this roster, into the staff. It's a prove it season. I mean, there's no other way around it. He has to capitalize on the talent that they were able to bring in, which look, there's definitely a lot of talent here. Caleb Wilson, the 5-star freshman incoming. Kyan Evans, a really solid point guard who can run things. Henry Visar, I think, was an underrated addition at the center position. And then you get Jaron Stevenson, a Jonathan Powell, just some other guys to fill roles. Seth Trimble returns. I think that's big for them as much as anything. But there's question marks left. I know that there was a lot of conversation about how much money they did spend on the roster throughout the offseason. People trying to reconcile that with the talent that they got. That's always a really tricky conversation to have until you see it out on the floor, and unless you get the numbers solidly knowing how much was spent, because there's a lot of conversation back and forth. You know, people saying it was a lot of money, people disputing that, saying it wasn't so much. You know, you're never going to get a straight answer when it comes to that. And you look at this North Carolina team, I placed them on the border of the top 25. Well, there's a chasing pack behind them of, I think, 3 schools who are right there, could easily blow by them if things don't immediately click for this unit. Virginia, with a new coach at the helm, they bring in a overhauled roster, but I think there's a lot to like. Ugonna Nyinsu comes in at the center position. Tis de Ritter comes in from overseas along with Johan Grunlow. Grunlow, a guy who had been in draft conversations at one point throughout the year. Malik Thomas fills out the backcourt with Dallin Hall, who is a really good facilitator at the point guard spot. You got Jakari White coming in on the wing. Plenty of other guys who provide depth for this unit. I just think that this is a team that's going to maybe fly under the radar for a little while early on in the season. But if things click the right way, I really like the archetype of this roster, the way that they filled out positions, the complementary aspect of some of these players, if it all does fit into place. Now, that's always a big if, especially when you bring in so many players, only 2 returners to this Virginia team. NC State in the same boat. Will Wade takes over, of course, overhauls this roster. One guy back from last season, but they bring in Darian Williams, who I ranked in the top 10 of returning players in college basketball this season. Vin Allen Lubin, transfer from North Carolina, a guy who a lot of people are high on. Trey Holloman joins the backcourt, was shocked when he left Michigan State and then ends up landing here. Terrence Arsenault, this is a team that has maybe some fit questions, maybe some distribution questions if we're trying to figure out who fills what role. Does everyone understand where they are in the pecking order here? But if Will Wade can get those things sorted out, he can find the right pieces to play, the right units and rotations. There is some raw talent here. There is some real potential in this group to get NC State clicking early in his tenure. Clemson follows up. They're just a solid member of this group at this point. Yes, they lose quite a bit of production from last year's roster, but you do bring in Nick Davidson, I think a solid center pickup. You bring in a combination of guys with RJ Godfrey returning to the program, Ephraim Johnson, Justin Porter, just some really solid guys to fit into the Clemson rotation. And I think that we're going to see them again put up an NCAA tournament caliber season, borderline whether they can get back into that top 25 discussion. Then we have a tier of teams that I think are in the NCAA tournament conversation, but I think that they're more bubble teams than they are locks to make the field. And that's Miami and SMU. Miami, completely new roster. There's a lot of talent on the roster. There's no question about it. Trey Donaldson, Malik Renault, Ernest Uday comes in. Shelton Henderson, the freshman, is getting rave reviews from his teammates during this preseason. But there's just some pieces that I wonder how they fit together that after maybe it's the PTSD of watching Miami over these last couple of years and saying they have talent. How's it going to fit? And then it just doesn't. Now, of course, not fair to completely match those side by side because Jay Lucas comes in, new coach, fresh ideas, a guy who was at Duke, has watched how John Shire developed, and so could have some really valuable insights there as he takes over his first head coaching position. SMU, another interesting one. They bring in Jaron Pierre, who I think has potential to really fill a needed role as they lose some production off of last year's roster. They bring back some really important pieces here. Boopy Miller is back. Samet Yigatuglu, BJ Edwards. I think that they've got just enough returning and some underrated talent maybe coming in with Jermaine O'Neal Jr., Jaden Toombs. I like what I see. Corey Washington comes in as long as Sam Walters, who can shoot the cover off the ball. So there's enough there from SMU that I think that they'll be in the conversation again. I think they'll be on that bubble another time when we're talking about them and debating how real it is getting down into the conference schedule. We have a trailing pack that I think could make it onto the bubble, but they've got a little bit more left to prove to me before I buy in completely. Syracuse brings back Donnie Freeman and JJ Sterling. Now, there's a big head start from a production standpoint. They bring in William Kyle, who I liked last year. Tyler Betsy, a prospect with some pedigree, didn't show it fully at at Cincinnati last year, but there's something there. Nate George, Nate Kings come in. Kyan Anthony is going to be one of the big storylines. How big of a role does he have on this Syracuse roster? And Sadiq White, another incoming prospect who has a lot of expectation behind him. I just wonder, based on the last couple of years and the struggle that they've had to fit the pieces together. And, you know, I say that JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman are a great starting point for your roster. Well, they were on the roster last year, and there wasn't a whole lot to get excited about. I just am at a point with Syracuse where they're going to have to prove it to me before I buy in and start talking about the way that they fit, the way that they play, because we just haven't seen enough success in these last couple of seasons. Wake Forest, we'll talk about again in the next segment, so we're not going to lock in on them here, but Pittsburgh joins this group with Barry Dunning coming in as a transfer. Papa Conte is back. Cameron Corrin returns for another season. I think that there's just enough on this Pittsburgh team to keep things interesting. Deshaun Jackson comes in. I'm really fascinated to see if they can make a push in this ACC, because we know, historically speaking, and just from a, I guess, odds of it situation, when I talked about those teams that were at the top of the conference, we know they're going to be in the mix. The teams that are top 25, maybe one of them is going to slip out of that conversation and onto the bubble, potentially onto the wrong side. Those bubble teams, could go either way, could make their way solidly in, could fall back. But this is the most volatile group. We could see them drop a tier to completely out of the mix, but we could also see them get themselves firmly up into the bubble conversation and be a team that we're talking about down the stretch of the season. I think one of these teams for sure is going to do that. Who will it be? I think Pittsburgh has a case to be made there. So does Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, who brings back Toby Lawal, Jaden Shutt. I like Amari Hansberry coming in to this team. Now, they don't have as much transfer talent coming in just across the board as some of the other teams. But I thought that a late addition got me far more encouraged about this unit than I previously was. And it was Nicholas Avdalis, who showed out late in the NBA draft process. I have him as a borderline first-round draft pick in the 2026 draft. So if he can bring that talent, if he can grow his game at the college level, I think that this is a team that could ride his success to a really nice season and get in the mix as well. Florida State, again, a team with a new head coach heading in a new direction. He brings NBA experience. He's got a new message behind him. They bring in Robert McCray, who was a big-time mid-major transfer. Chauncey Wiggins comes in. Really like what he provides from a just a role player in the front court perspective. There's holes on the roster for sure. But I think that there's enough talent there to get something going, to get this program headed back in the right direction as they continue to develop an identity there. Georgia Tech. Look, Georgia Tech under Damon Stoudemire has had just this feeling that they're on the edge, that they're about to break through and find something, just that little extra gear to be special. They haven't quite found the formula to make that breakthrough yet, but Baye Ndongo, I mean, he's a great starting point to have in that front court. I think bringing in Cam Kraft could be big for them. Chaz Kelly joins. There's some front court depth coming in behind Ndongo that could help him out in a major way. But again, there's just these teams in this tier have a hole here or there that just makes you kind of question, just can they do it? Can they do it this year? Is it going to take another year of filling gaps and filling holes before they're able to fully get things going? We'll see as the season plays on. And then at the bottom of the conference, we have Notre Dame, who I guess can get out of this for sure if things fall the right way with Jalen Harrelson. Can he have a breakout freshman season? Can Braden Shrewsbury take another leap? Marcus Burton, he's going to be the star. He's going to be what makes this team run. There's no question about that at the point guard spot. California, some unfortunate departures for them. They just lost most of the players that I was excited about, that I thought were really interesting last year. They bring in some good replacements, but not sure it's going to be quite be enough with Day-Day Ames, Chris Bell, and a few others in those positions. Stanford, I think that losing Maxime Reynaud is going to just be a massive blow to this team. It's just going to be really hard to overcome. I know Chisholm Okpara is back, interested to see how much production he can create, but there's still going to be some questions there for sure. And Boston College, look, I think that it'll be interesting to see, can Aiden Shaw in a new location find something there? Can Donald Hand and some other returners grow in their role? But I just don't see this team. Jason Nasamoto, another one, incoming, who I think could benefit from a change of scenery. But you look at the gap from this roster to the rosters that we're talking about, even in the bubble conversation. And I just think it's too big to overcome. I see them struggling at times throughout the ACC schedule. When we come back on the other side, we're going to have Conor O'Neill of Devils Illustrated and Deacons Illustrated. You're not going to want to miss those breakdowns of a couple big North Carolina programs. Welcome back in here to Three True Values. We have Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated and Deacons Illustrated. He covers all things Duke and Wake Forest. You're going to want to check out all his stuff throughout the season. He doesn't just do basketball, he covers all the sports going on there. So there's still football happening if you want to check those out. But obviously, we talk basketball on this podcast. So, Conor, thank you for joining. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the state of North Carolina, particularly in the basketball realm.
Yeah, James, thanks for having me. It's always feels like this time of year, the leaves start changing and people start buzzing around Tobacco Road for basketball season. So
Yeah, for
we're
sure.
about there. We're a little less than a month away from games that actually matter. So
Right. And Duke, I think, is going to be really interesting. I want to just kind of dive into things here with them because I've been so fascinated by the John Shire tenure. Of course, massive shoes to fill replacing Coach K as he retires. He had that experience as head coach in waiting where he was able to kind of focus on the recruiting, focus on what he wanted the program to become, and then implement it. But I've seen since his first year, I've seen an evolution, a growth that is so impressive to me as a first time head coach because I'm not sure there's another coach in the country who knows the archetypes of players he wants better than John Shire with the superstar freshman, those 3-and-D wings around him, the shot blocker in the middle, the ball handler who can really just slow the pace down, control the game up top. Uh, how much have you seen him grow in that head coaching role just since he's taken over?
yeah, it is an interesting point you raise. I do think you cannot speak enough about John's evolution as a coach. It's easy to point at and say 89 wins and list off the trophies that they've won in the last 3 years, but he has developed. He actually talked about that yesterday at ACC Media Day and talking about how the before he asks, he said Malik Brown and Caleb Foster because they were the two guys on stage with him, but said before he asks them what they can improve, he looks at himself and looks inward. Um, there was a shift after his second year and before his third year, so before last season, where look, Jeremy Roach did a lot of great things at
Yeah.
Duke. Like he was the link between the Coach K era and the John Shire era, but John kind of made the conscious decision of I want positional length. I don't want to have 6 foot nothing guards on the court. It's
Yes.
a little bit too much of a liability. What you gain offensively with somebody who is as efficient as Jeremy was in his quote unquote senior season, even though he had another year last year, what you gain offensively and efficiency, you give up more so on the defensive end,
Mhm.
and you open yourself up for not being able to switch 1 through 5 like they were able to do last year, better than anybody. I think better than any team I've ever covered, at least. So that's why for the second straight year, there's nobody in Deuce rotation under 6'5". It
Yeah.
feels a little bit like there's a height minimum, like it's a roller coaster at Duke. That might not that I don't think that's going to be the case every single year under John Shire. The with the wink and nod to them leading for Jordan Smith Jr. on the
Mhm.
recruiting trail right now. But the shift to positional length, the shift to that kind of authors the way they play defense.
Right.
Um, their offense is going to come. They recruit such a high level of player and they're going to have shot makers, I think, every single season.
Yes.
Like the last 2 years, that's been a consistent. The first year, he had a team that kind of couldn't throw it in the ocean sometimes, but they played really good defense. I looked at last year as the blend, and I think this year is going to be more of a blend where they can put five guys on the court who can make threes, but they're also going to defend the heck out of you.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is with Duke and with a lot of the other blue bloods, there's kind of this perception that it's a bunch of five stars and you kind of throw them all out there. They're all one and dones. And yeah, there was a stretch where that was happening, but particularly with Shire these last couple of years, it has been handpicked. It feels like maybe a smaller group that he specifically wants their skill set. He specifically wants what they plug in with a couple of returners, a couple of transfers who all fit a very specific role, a very specific spot that he wants. And I think that once you can get that plug and play ability, that's when you start finding the big time success, those deep runs consistently, because you know what you're getting. You know, it's a matter of which player is in that spot, not a matter of, okay, what do we have when you have 12 transfers or 12 freshmen or whatever the case is. There's a lot more continuity, it feels like, even when he is bringing in new names, new faces each season.
Yeah, and that's another kind of lesson that they learned.
Mhm.
And this is a little bit where I have a little skepticism for this season. The last time they didn't bring any transfers at all in the rotation was the 23-24 season, and 27 wins, went to the Elite Eight. It was a good year. He felt like they lacked toughness.
Yeah,
And that's why all of a sudden last year you saw Sion James, Mason Gillis, and Malik Brown show up. And
right.
you can get toughness out of freshmen. I never doubted the toughness of Cooper Flag or Con
Yeah,
Knipple last season, but that's where this year, yeah, I guess you can still talk about Malik Brown. I don't talk about transfers in their second years. I think of
yeah,
them as returning players, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. In football, we talk about the best teams use the transfer portal to fill their recruiting misses, and
mhm,
it can't be the same discussion for basketball because you have so many less roster spots. But I do think there's something to be said for I think if you have the teams that just bring in a whole crop of transfers every single season, um, the volatility can sway so far one way or the other. I
yeah,
mean, Pat Kelsey made it work last year at
right.
Louisville. I don't think that's what Pat Kelsey wants to do every single season,
No,
which is why they have Michael Brown coming in to run the point this year.
yeah,
So that's where I think John is kind of hitting what he thinks Duke needs. When you bring in five freshmen and you have five returners, maybe you don't need to go to the transfer route, but
right.
then you remind yourself they had Cedric Howard lined up until he looked like
Yeah.
a lottery pick, and Dame Sarr was probably not going to be at Duke if that plays out that way.
Yeah, you mentioned Dame Sarr there, and it's interesting because I almost forget that they didn't bring any transfers because I almost think of him as one because he has professional experience. He
Yeah,
was overseas. You know, he comes in as a guy who was really kind of on the edge of people thinking, will he go to the NBA draft? Will he spend a year in the college ranks? And so I give them a little bit more leeway, I think, in my mind when I'm thinking about guys that they brought in, giving him that little edge over the guys who are coming from high school because we've seen some of these international players, especially the ones that play at a higher level like he did, they can get things rolling a little bit quicker as long as they're in a system where they have an established role. And I think he's going to have that at Duke for sure.
yeah. It's all due respect to EYBL and whoever Christopher Columbus High School in Miami with the Boozer twins were playing last year. I don't think any of Duke's other freshmen have the experience of playing in what's the league Liga A or
Yeah.
it's
He played in a couple because they have the multiple competitions over there. But yeah, he played in Spain and then also in European competition as well.
gotcha. So yeah, that makes his experience a little different. You're still going to think of him as a freshman because
Right.
it's not going to matter. But I think he does have 4 years of eligibility. I'm sure he's not going to use three of those.
Yeah, probably. But you talk about the boozers there, and obviously they're the big talk of the town. They're the duo that Duke was chasing for many years on the recruiting trail. Obviously, Cameron Boozer is the quintessential five-star, one and done kind of prospect. Is he going to be expected to come in and kind of fill the shoes of Cooper Flag, or are they looking for him to create a different role in this Duke offense.
That's the thing. I really don't think you can expect somebody to fill the shoes of a generational talent.
Yeah.
Um, I think Cam Boozer's role will closer mimic that of Paolo Banchero, in where he'll run some point forward. I mean, he'll have some initiator ability, but I think it'll be more low post touches. I think it'll be more spot up shots. I mean, I think his talent is a little different to
Mhm.
where we've seen for 3 years John Shire's gonna mold his offense and put his players in the best positions to make the reads that they want to run the stuff that they want and makes them successful. So it's gonna be different. I think the biggest mental hurdle for Duke right now is getting Cam Boozer to understand he does not have to be Cooper Flag. Um, because there's only one Cooper Flag, and he
Right.
plays for the Mavericks now.
Yeah, for sure. And then his brother Caden is a guy that I think I'm a little bit higher on than a lot of people. I know obviously Caleb Foster still in that backcourt, so he's not going to just be running the show for the majority of the game. But I really liked his ability to kind of be that metronome at the point guard spot throughout his high school career. We saw him playing with a bunch of five-star talent around him, and it always felt like he had a lot of control when he was out there on the court, and that's something that's invaluable as a point guard. So, how has he looked early on, and what are you hearing about him as he enters his freshman season?
Duke is high on him too. We only got a glimpse of an open practice, and I have questions about his shot. I don't know if he's gonna be a off the dribble type of shooter just from where he brings it. It's so horizontal.
Yeah,
Um, Spot up shooter. I mean, Duke is probably going to have open shots available with how much attention Cam Boozer will draw, how much attention Pat Gongba will draw. Um, it's and I mentioned skepticism earlier. My skepticism kind of comes from I don't know who of Caleb Foster and Caden Boozer takes the reins of this team. I don't know
right.
if they do it together. It's certainly an interesting dynamic when you talk about are they going to play both of them together? It's kind of like the situation of asking whether they're going to play two centers together.
Yeah,
Because Malik Brown, if they really wanted, could play some four with Gongba at the five, but then you're running the risk of tiring them out at the same time. If they're both picking up fouls, they're in foul trouble at the same time.
yeah,
It's kind of the same question at point guard. Like if you play both of those guys together and then one's in foul trouble and one needs a break, does Dame Sarr come in and run the point?
right.
Does Darren Harris run a little bit of point? Like who brings the ball up? Who initiates offense? Do you just that? And that's where we get back to how much of Cam Boozer's role is close to what Cooper Flag did last year in bringing the ball
Yeah,
up the court and initiating. So I don't think there'll be a complete like down the middle 20 minutes split or even 24 and 16 on one side. I think they will
right.
play a little bit more together. I just don't think they can run the risk of playing them too much together. And they've got to figure out what they look like. Who's gonna kind of take the reins of it? Because sometimes you got to remember this time last year we thought Caleb Foster would be the point guard for Duke,
Yeah,
and for the first month of the season, Caleb Foster was the point guard for Duke, and then Sion James took over, and they were a better team with Sion James running things.
right. Yeah, there's a lot left to unpack for sure throughout the season, but that's the good thing. You can kind of take that time. You can see how it plays out through the non-conference schedule and get things in the right positions. Look, that Florida team that won the championship last year, they didn't play the same exact rotations that they did early in the non-conference schedule through the NCAA tournament. So there's a lot of growth that's going to come. We're going to see a lot of shifting around. But I want to talk to you about something before we transition to Wake Forest off the court at Duke that I found a really interesting storyline over the past week or so. Jason Tatum is going to be helping out during his rehab process. He's going to help out the Duke program and provide, I guess, just an ear and a voice who's been there and done that. But what kind of role can you see him having? Obviously, it's a big sales pitch if you can promise these five-star players that they're going to get to see it and hear it from a guy who's been there and done that, everything they want to achieve.
Yeah, I think that it's a really it's a unique setup that Duke has. They love obviously they love to tout the brotherhood, and anybody that is around there will tell you it's not just some company slogan that they feel like they have to repeat X number of times each week or each month or each press conference even. They want it to feel authentic and real. And this is as much as I don't want to also parrot what they want said and the storylines that they went out there. I think there is some legitimacy to it. And I think I saw a quote lifted. I didn't actually listen to the whole thing, but I think Jason Tatum was on a podcast. It might have even been the one he recorded with John Shire, saying when he was at Duke, he had former players and people reach out to him and tell him like, "Here's my number. Call if you need anything." And he felt like he didn't really take advantage of that because he figured, pick a name like Kyrie
Right.
or somebody who had come through there before would be way too busy. They're in the NBA. Like
Yeah.
what time do they have to tell a freshman at Duke to work on his jab step or something like that? So he wanted to make sure he makes himself available. And John talked about formalizing that and actually putting a title on it and making sure it looks official. And it's look if you're churning out the types of players that Duke is on a not every single year basis,
I mean,
but at
it's
least
getting close.
yeah, pretty often. I mean, they're just in the last I think what is it 6 years? They've had their starting five drafted twice to
Yeah.
the NBA. If you're churning out those types of players, then you want them to come back and be involved, and you want the machine to keep churning, and I think that's a little bit of what this is, and it's also putting some authenticity on what they're selling with the Brotherhood.
Yeah, for sure. And just down the road, you've got Wake Forest, who I've been a big fan of the Steve Forbes era. I feel like he's built a really solid program, but it's been a couple of years since they've had the kind of success that he proved that they could reach in the program. So, what is it going to take to get back to that place, competing for NCAA tournament spots and trying to make deep runs through the postseason?
So my theory in looking at what made Steve's team successful at ETSU and why he hasn't had quite the same level of success, and it is right there. They've been knocking on the door a couple
Mhm.
years. Is you go back and look at the teams at ETSU, and they were really deep. They could go deep into their bench, bring four or five guys off that they wouldn't lose anything. They would play hard. They would provide something. And the one common thread for through the last 4 years at Wake Forest, Steve's been there five, but the COVID year he didn't even get to recruit his own team. He basically had to put together a shell of it with what he could during COVID. But the last 4 years, they just have not had the same type of depth. They wind up relying on four or five guys to play 32, 34, even some of the like they usually have at least one and maybe two guys in the top 10 in the ACC in minutes per game.
Yeah.
And that just wears down athletes. And we can have the argument of whether 20 and 21-year-olds should be wearing down at that rate. I mean, maybe they shouldn't, but that's what happens at Wake Forest,
Right.
and that's why they drop some games that they you feel like they shouldn't drop, and that's why they go from early February looking like an NCAA tournament team to late February and March they're losing games that you think they shouldn't have lost and wouldn't have lost a month or two earlier,
Yeah.
and it feels like they just get worn down. It had like the Alondis Williams year. Alondis had turf toe at the end of the season.
Mhm.
The next year, Damari Monsanto had an unfortunate injury where he blew out his kneecap, I think. Tyree Appleby was not the same type of player that he was at the end of that season. Davian Williams, like
Yeah.
it goes on and on. It feels like the riddle of getting Wake Forest back into the NCAA tournament is solved by developing some depth, having a sixth man who can come in and give you more than 20 minutes a game, a seventh and eighth that you can count on for quality minutes in big type spots, and then even getting some spot minutes out of freshmen that
Mhm.
might be on the bench. And it feels like if that happens, um, they can crack the seal.
Yeah, that's the hope, of course. And I think that in the absence of Hunter Salas, Efton Reed, you're losing a lot there. Even Cam Hildreth, having Trayvon Spillers back, I think is going to be huge because he was a guy that I was high on and thought could have a real impact last year. He did have a good impact, I thought, on the team throughout the season, and now he can kind of be that returning force, the constant in this lineup that has a lot of talent around. They brought in some good transfers, some guys that I like you said, some young guys who can potentially fill a role. But how important was it to get him back and to kind of make him a focal point on this team?
Yeah, it was crazy. I was just talking to him yesterday about this. He spent the majority of last season thinking it was his last year in college basketball. I mean, that was going to be it. He was on his last year of eligibility, and then all of a sudden the Diego Pavia stuff comes through, and it feels like it was January and into February, and then it's February, and it's like, well, Trey Spillers was at JUCOs for his first two seasons.
Yeah,
He's got another year now. And he was telling us his he didn't name the assistant, but one of his assistants texted him and asked, like, what do you want to do for senior day since you've got this other year? Do you still want to go through it? And he was like, no, that's dumb. Like, why would I do it twice? I'll just do it next year. Like, okay. So it's a big boost for Wake that they have him back. They know exactly what they're going to get from Trey. They know they're going to get somebody they can put on the floor at either the 4 or 5 who's going to protect the rim, even though he's only 6'7". He doesn't jump off the page as a great rim protector, but he's going to be in there and block shots because he's got timing and he's got athleticism to do it. And he's just more than anything the thing that endears him to Steve and why he'll get minutes even if he's not making shots. He plays with 100% effort all the time, and that's if you want to play for Steve Forbes, that's kind of the
yeah,
first box you need to check. And Trey does that without much question.
yeah, for sure. And there are newcomers surrounding him. And so I'm interested as we kind of start to approach the season. Obviously, ACC Media Days has come and gone. Who are you kind of expecting at this point to be those other guys who fill in all the production that needs to be replaced on this roster? Who's going to kind of step up and be the new star on this team?
So first, I will go with the returner. I love Drew Karras.
Okay.
I've loved Drew Karras' game since junior year of high school, going down to Salisbury to see him. I think he's primed for a really big jump. I think he'll be joined by a bunch of transfers and Trey. Another returner, Omaha Blue.
Yeah.
It's just at this point a question of whether he can be healthy, and if
Right.
he's healthy and reaching the potential that he showed in high school to be a top 10 or 12 recruit, that'll be a phenomenal lift for this team.
Yeah.
But the newcomers, Nate Calmise will be this team's point guard. It's just at this point it's a matter of how many minutes can he sustain, and that goes back to the depth conversation. I don't think they want to play him 38 minutes a game. I think that's one that it's only break glass if necessary on that.
Yeah.
But he'll have the ball in his hands. He scored 15 a game last year for Washington State. He'll be the initiator. I think Makai Mason starts at the off-ball guard spot. He averaged about 10 for Washington last year. He's a 40% three-point shooter.
Yeah.
For a team that shot 28.5% last year and had an issue with ball movement
Yeah.
and the ball being sticky, as Steve likes to say. Uh, I think Makai Mason will be a great addition to this team. Miles Colvin comes from Purdue. I think he'll come off the bench. I look at it as they've got 3 guys for 2 spots with
Right.
Juke, Makai, and Miles Colvin, all super athletic, all just project as off-ball guard slash wing types. Um, it's not a bad situation to have. It's not a bad problem to have when you
No.
have 80 minutes when you think about
Right.
2 spots and 3 guys to play them.
Yeah.
Um, and I think Miles will be really athletic in there. And then Cooper Schweiger, who they brought in from Valpo. He'll play center. Um, I'm we'll have to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
He was brought in to have a large role, and the one open practice we got in early August, he was not working with the first team. It was Trey and Omaha working as the 4 and 5 that day.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see Cooper kind of adjust. Granted, that was 2 months ago,
Right.
so they've spoken highly of him since. I still kind of think with Omaha's health, uh, I would assume Cooper Schweiger starts at the 5 when they have a game in, but it's about 26 days or
Yeah.
so.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, November 3rd. So they're it's typical kind of Wake Forest. They have 5 transfers. Sebastian Akins is the one that I didn't mention. He'll
Yeah.
play some backup point guard. He's a little more of a developmental guy. Had a freshman of the year in whatever league Denver plays in, but had a very high usage. I think I'll have to get used to a new role this year,
Right.
but it's kind of a Steve Forbes special of 5 newcomers, and a lot of them are going to play pretty big roles.
Yeah, for sure. And you talked about there, I know at the very beginning of this, when we were talking about Wake Forest, we said the key could be having a viable six man. And as you're talking about the advantage of having three guys for two spots, there's your hope. If you're a Wake Forest fan
Yeah.
and you're thinking this is the year that we can turn it around, that's the hope right there. Is that you've got this trio of guys, Juke Harris, who a lot of people are high on having a raised impact. You've got Miles Colvin. I mean, look, he's coming from a winning culture at the very least at Purdue,
Yeah.
and understanding what needs to be done. And then, as you said, Mason, a guy who provides them an element that they just didn't have last year in that wing spot. So, a lot to be excited about all across Tobacco Road and all through the ACC. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for breaking this stuff down with us. Really appreciate it, and really enjoy the insight into these programs.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James.
All right, talk to you soon. Welcome back in here on Three True Values. We've got Nick Schultz of On Three joining us. He is our expert on all things Missouri Valley and A10. Of course, he's got the Loyola Ramblers pennant there behind him. He is great to talk to when you want to learn about these mid-major programs because let's be honest, you're out on the street, you're talking about college basketball. How many people are going to say, you know what? I really like Illinois State. I got to get down there and check out what they're doing. Not many, but that's what me and Nick were talking about here before we started recording. Nick, thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking through the nitty gritty, what true basketball fans want to know here.
Fletch, it's always great to talk to you. And with Illinois State, it's 45 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
Too easy. My mom drives down to Normal, where it's at for work every day. So it's right in our backyard.
Yeah,
great.
real manageable. And they are the
Yeah.
favorites right now
Yeah.
to win the Missouri Valley. What do you like about this team? Ryan Peden is the coach there. It feels like they've got something building. They've kind of put together the pieces, and that's what you got to do in these mid-major conferences.
Yeah, Illinois State impressed me during the CBI last year. And with their ability to retain, I mean, they've got most of their studs
Right.
coming back. Like you got Walker, Johnny Kinzinger, and Ty Pence are all back, among others. The question is now, when I was at Loyola was in the Missouri Valley.
Mhm.
Illinois State, my freshman year, was the year they should have made the NCAA tournament and didn't, because that was the old DRPI, and we're not going to get into we don't need to rehash that. That's been rehashed long enough in the last 10 years. But the problem with that was Dan Muller couldn't sustain it.
Yeah.
Didn't help that Wichita State left, Loyola got hot. All of a sudden, Loyola takes over the league.
Of course.
But the question for Dan Muller and Illinois State was, can you sustain? It's my question here with Ryan Peden, too. And I think they've got enough guys coming back and fresh off the CBI. I think that's important. Any type of postseason experience is good postseason experience, in my opinion. So having these guys back with that experience, going deep into the tournament and winning it, I like it a lot. And I think the Missouri Valley as a whole is going to be interesting because you don't have Missouri State now. So now, they weren't necessarily toward the top of the league at all. were kind of building back under Consul Martin. Now they're in Conference USA.
Right.
So the Valley as a whole is shifting. Illinois State has an opportunity here. You can seize the Valley and be one of these teams that's up there at the top year in, year out.
For sure. And you talk about the retention, and I think that's the name of the game, especially in these mid-major conferences. You're not pulling some transfer who was averaging 18 points last season. That's just not happening here. You might get a guy from a little bit higher level who didn't get on the floor, and then you're doing a lot of projecting. That's something that I've talked to mid-major coaches about in the last year or two, just what that evaluation is really like when you don't have as much tape and you're trying to get a guy. Or do you go down to the D2 level and pull up guys there in AIA? Do you try to find those guys the same way that high major coaches are trying to find the mid-major players who were stars? Do you go down a level and see if they can make that translation up? Of course, there's risks there as well. So getting back known commodities, I mean, that is gold for you. But there is another team that lost 100% of their production last year. Murray State, I am pretty familiar with much of that staff. Of course, Ryan Miller gets the job coming from Creighton, where he was a longtime assistant there. Mason Miller transfers in. He was a guy who was a starter for multiple seasons at Creighton. Now did not take on a big scoring role, but is going to come into Murray State, presumably take on a bigger set of responsibilities there. And of course, when we talk about Ryan Miller, we talk about Mason Miller, both related to NBA star Mike Miller, who is now, he's been an agent. He has worked with all kinds of different players. He's working on a lot of interesting things right now, but basketball runs in the family there. And I've seen these guys in action. I really like what they're building there. I think that this first roster, now we'll see, because again, they're putting pieces together here. None of these guys have really played together. This is not a cohesive unit yet, but the talent is there. It is a really talented roster to show up in the Missouri Valley.
I think there's a reason when you talk about all that turnover, all new faces on the roster, they picked third in the preseason poll.
Mm-hmm.
And the Valley did the preseason poll different this year. I think they only did the top 5. They didn't do a full top to bottom. And I didn't see like a preseason all conference team anywhere, at least not yet that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
I know they did a bunch of previews with our guys at the Field of 68 and everything,
yeah.
But Murray State was in that top 5 with a brand new roster. So that speaks to, like you said, there's plenty of talent. I thought the coaching hire was a home run. And I want to see now, like you said, how are these pieces going to fit together? Can you live up to this, or is it going to take maybe a little more time to get these guys working together? And obviously retention is part of that. Yeah. But you've got the guy at coach to handle this. You got from that basketball background with his family. Now put this all together and see if you can make a run at this thing. I always say it doesn't matter until Arch Madness, because Arch Madness just gets absolutely insane. That's not to discredit the regular season. That's to credit how crazy Arch Madness can get. So if you can get this team playing its best basketball January, February, go into St. Louis and do something special.
For sure. And maybe not for this year, but I think moving forward, it is important that a guy like Ja Morant, one of the biggest global stars of the game, is out there promoting the Murray State brand. He's not just a guy who played at a mid-major school. He reps the brand. I don't know if you saw during training camp, the Grizzlies were at Belmont working out, and he wore Murray State gear every day during his media availability. He was making sure that they knew where his allegiances stood. He of course used to be on the client list for Mike Miller. So the ties just keep running deep here. And as we know, in this era of college basketball, having ties to people, whether it's deep pockets or a wide spread brand, it's important to building at any level of the sport. We talk, though, about Northern Iowa next here, I think. And Ben Jacobson, I'm going to say what we say every year when we talk about Northern Iowa. I don't care. I'm not betting against him. I'm just not going to do it.
It used to be, we used to talk when I was on the beat, that it was the Ben Jacobson Invitational in St. Louis. Because, I mean, at that guy under the arch at Enterprise Center is automatic. I will never, ever. He could be in Murray State's position. He could lose the entire roster, bring in all new guys that nobody's ever heard of. I'm still going to bet on Ben Jacobson. And guess what? Northern Iowa was in that top 5 of the preseason poll as well. They got some new guys in there. They kept Trey Campbell. They got a couple other guys. And I did this. I was writing down a couple names for you. They kept Ben Schweiger, story there. He played at Loyola with Ryan Schweiger, who spells his name the same way. I had the other name written down.
Yeah.
So he got Ben Schweiger coming back as part of that group too. They added Jalen Wilson from the recruiting trail. It's Ben Jacobson. I'm going to trust him to bring in some new guys who can make an immediate impact. You retained a couple guys. I won't ever count out Northern Iowa, especially late in the year, because it is the Ben Jacobson Invitational at Enterprise Center.
For sure. Now, Belmont and Bradley round out that top 5 that we've been referencing in that media poll. But I was, I think, most interested in the team that missed out, that being Drake. Now, Drake, of course, they lost Darian DeVries and then bring in Ben McCollum. And there were some questions. He's bringing a bunch of D2 players to play at this level. And then he had great success and immediately gets the Iowa job. Guess what? He took all those D2 players with him to Iowa for the most part. So Drake again hits reset. And they bring in Eric Henderson, another coach who I really like. I think he's done a lot of good things, but not getting the love here with the turnover. Can he repeat what his predecessors have done and flip a roster quick and get something going here at Drake?
Well, that's the question. And I think that's another hire that you hear it and you go, from South Dakota State, they did it again. They went and got a guy from a lower level who had success, bring him into the Missouri Valley. You've got a ton of roster turnover there as well. Yep. What he did at South Dakota State was impressive. I understand why they wouldn't get the top 5, just because, again, there's so many question marks. And I know Murray State had the entire roster overhaul. With the guys they brought in, I think they had a little more fanfare, for lack of a better phrase.
They did. They also brought in guys who were from a higher level. Again, we talked about coming down rather than those coming up.
Yes. Drake didn't bring a lot of guys that were coming down. So it's a matter of there's so many question marks. I don't know where they would have fallen if we had a full preseason poll, but I think they nailed the hire again. I'm not saying he's going to be Darren DeVries, who's now at Indiana, or Ben McCollum, who found the perfect job at Iowa. I mean, that was just bad. As soon as that opened up, we all said it's bad timing. He's going to Iowa.
Yes.
That you could not have tailor-made a job for anyone better than Ben McCollum, who we'll hear from this week. I think Eric Henderson is going to be just fine in the Missouri Valley. I just need to see what this all looks like before we can say anything. And it's not a knock on anybody.
No. He's
going to be fine. Let's see a few games and see what happens early on before we can kind of see if they can break into this thing.
For sure. I think it's a deep conference in a different kind of way. We used to look at the Missouri Valley and kind of go, can they sneak a second bid out of this? And it's not quite that anymore, but there's a lot of teams that feel like they're up there that are going to be in contention, that are moving up in their trajectory towards being an NCAA tournament caliber team.
The saying when I left the Valley was the Valley runs deep. That was their hashtag when I graduated Loyola. It's still true. It's always one of the deepest mid-major leagues. And that's why Arch Madness gets so crazy. It's because top to bottom, it's crazy. I think it's going to be one bid. See if there's some surprises this year, but the Valley runs deep. Always does.
For sure. We'll talk about the new conference. Not new anymore, but the last couple of years of the Loyola Ramblers there, the A10, where VCU finishes first in the preseason poll, picked to repeat despite them having some turnover there, coaching turnover, some players in and out, but they do keep a couple of guys on that roster that I think give them a chance to have great success here. I'm looking particularly for a big jump from Brandon Jennings.
Yes, I think he's going to be obviously a big part of this too, but the hire they brought in, it surprised me with Phil Martelli Jr. That's a familiar name in the A10. And I believe his dad's coming with him, right? In some capacity.
I believe there's some kind of, I don't know the exact.
He's not assistant. I don't think he's going to be like an assistant coach level. I wonder if he's like a special assistant. Phil Martelli Sr.,
something along those lines. Yeah.
He's going to be around. So you've got a guy who knows the league inside and out. The thing with VCU, it's another one kind of, when they finished first in the preseason poll, it kind of surprised me because you haven't heard much about the big time additions. But I mean, you saw Phil Martelli Jr. at Bryant. Bryant was where he came from.
Yes.
And you saw what he did there, getting the NCAA tournament, got a win. Now he goes to VCU. It seemed like a surprise hire, not in a bad way. Like it just, I didn't think he'd be available yet. I thought he'd maybe stay at Bryant for another year. And just the timing of it, like, okay, let's see what he can do. Being picked first, now the expectations are high. are they going to live up to this? Because I'm old enough to remember going back to the Missouri Valley when Missouri State was picked first in the preseason poll. That was 2017-18. Because I remember it because I asked Porter Moser, who should I pick first? He said Missouri State, not us. Missouri State finished I think Missouri State finished like 7th that year.
Right.
And that was the year Loyola made the Final Four. So hopefully you can avoid something like that with VCU. But like I said, Brandon Jennings is going to be a big part of what they do. We're going to see Phil Martelli Jr. You're getting a bigger stage here.
Yeah.
How's it going to look? What's this going to be like? And what kind of impact is his dad going to have? Because I think
for sure
having Phil Martelli Sr. as a resource is huge. Like you absolutely lean on a guy like that.
Yeah. And then you look at the team that finished one vote behind them in the preseason polls. They tied in first place votes. 1 point separated them in the preseason poll.
Yeah.
St. Louis, Josh Schertz, Robbie Avila back at it again. They kind of fell out of the national radar last year because that St. Louis team, it hit some of those roadblocks of bringing in a whole new roster that we talk about. But it feels like there's a lot more confidence, at least from those who are voting in this poll, that, okay, yes, it hit a roadblock. They went through some of those struggles, but now we're going to see it start clicking. We know what kind of coach this is. We know what kind of player he has anchoring this team. And there's a belief they're going to get it rolling.
That was the case of the other side of it. When you bring in a guy from a lower level, like the Missouri Valley to the A10, there's still a jump to be made there. Ask Drew Valentine about the jump from the Missouri Valley to the A10. Like there's a jump to take there. And he brought some guys from Indiana State, Robbie being one of them. They played well. But the thing is, you've got to adjust. It's a little bit more the athleticism. You got to play a little wider, a little bigger. Now, I think he's got the year. He knows what to expect now. You kept Robbie. That's a big part of what they do is they kept Robbie. And I mean, they added some guys too. I mean, they got in Brady Dunlap from St. John's, Power Conference transfer. Big East is the Power Conference. Don't let anyone tell you different.
Oh, it definitely is.
Deion Brown from Boston College. Dion. I think it's Deion. Brown.
Yep.
Deion Brown coming in. You got the transfer from Quinnipiac. I think it's Otieno. He's a double machine. And they got a freshman coming in Diakite, who I really like too. So you went and added the pieces you needed. I think this roster fits the A10 a little better. Right. And that's one of the things. Year one, do what you can with the guys you brought. Now you know what to go get. And I think St. Louis did a good job this offseason. The preseason poll was closer than I expected. That's a place with some high expectations for sure this year.
Yeah, you definitely don't see that close of a result in a preseason poll. And usually, especially you get that a little bit of groupthink. You get coaches who kind of, hey, what do you think's going on? Hey, what you hear what's going on at that school? And you kind of get the same information starts filtering around. But clearly they think it's going to be a tight race at the top of the A10 here. Dayton also receiving votes. No question. Look, they lose a lot of talent off of what was a really, really good roster. It
was a really good team last year.
But they've got a few pieces left over here. I think enough to at least compete in the conference. And then not finishing fourth, but receiving votes for first place is Loyola there with Miles Rubin back to anchor things for the Ramblers. What do you like from this team coming into the year?
I know Drew Valentine is really high on Justin Moore. He's coming back from an injury, got the extra year. I talked to Drew, this would have been about a month ago now, and Justin Moore wasn't quite at full strength yet. They were getting there. It sounds like he's really close to full strength now, if not all the way there, a little over a month later. And having Miles Rubin back, retaining him was huge. I mean, what he does in the paint, and Drew called him the best defender in the league. There's a case to be made there.
I think
you've got a really strong, you got a really strong case there. So you got him. Bringing Justin Moore back is going to be huge if he can stay healthy the full year, because he was running that offense like a machine, goes down with the knee injury, he's done for the year. Yes, you lose Jaden Dawson to Kansas, but I think they did a great job in the portal this offseason. They kind of brought in a mix of guys with that power conference experience. Dominic Harris from UCLA, he's kind of bounced around a little bit, but he's still got experience in the Big Ten and UCLA, which is still weird to say. You got Ola Joseph out of Cal, power conference experience.
I really liked that addition, by the way.
And I also like Tavares from Charleston. So you've got a guy coming up. So I think Drew did a really good job. He and the staff did a really good job kind of putting this roster together with some guys with different experience. The other big question I have is you lost Sean Dwyer off the bench. He went to the NBA. So you got an assistant coaching change. And Sean was a big part of what they did. I think they'll be fine. But they've got the staff is deep enough. Drew's got his guys, but I think losing Dwyer, I'm curious to see how that that's just kind of big picture, kind of inside baseball, but that's of note. But Drew's excited about this team based on
For sure.
talking to him a little while ago.
Yeah, George Washington, who we kind of, not to skip over, but Loyola did receive first place votes.
Right.
They're in there as well among the
GW did a
top
good job
teams
this year too.
Rafael Castro coming back. I really like him, what I was able to see during the offseason. I like to go around, especially these mid-major guys, particularly the ones that stay, of course, and guys who put up big stat lines.
Mm-hmm.
Because you talk about growth year over year, and if he can grow from the performance that he put up, I think around 18 points, over 8 rebounds a game, is picked as a preseason all defensive selection here as well. I mean, that's the kind of thing that can carry you to an NCAA tournament appearance, that you can get into the postseason and you know exactly who you're leaning on. If he's playing his best basketball, they're a team that could get hot and make a little run behind him.
We got to give Chris Caputo some credit too for the job he's done there, because he came in when they hired Jamie and Christian. I was kind of like, okay, you kind of got this hotshot guy coming in, rising star. Let's see what happens. And it didn't work. So now you went back and got a guy with DMV ties who was under Larinaga at Miami. And now you've got these types of guys staying, and then you're adding to it too.
Yeah.
Like I think GW is in a really good spot. And I think they've leaned into those DMV ties, get back to recruiting the DMV, and look what's happening.
Yeah.
So they're a team I'm watching close. Castro, I'm super excited to see this year.
Yeah. I think
he's one of those guys.
One of the best in the conference right there with Ruben, for sure.
Yes. It's going to be a fun league. The whole league looks fun this year. And I mean, there are other question marks too. Like poor St. Joe's. He had a coaching change in September. Like
I was just about to bring that up. That feels like St. Joe's. I would have probably expected to be a little bit higher up this list. Then you get the coaching change, and it feels like maybe they're too high, right? Maybe like the amount of turnover. You usually don't see a coaching change this late and then the season go well. So I've got real concerns about what St. Joe's does, how they move forward, how they rally that group together. And then the most fun storyline of them all here in this conference is what Woj has got cooking down with St. Bonaventure. I don't think it's quite there yet, but I mean, he's building up that brand. He's putting the word out there. And we talked about when we were talking about the Missouri Valley, John Morant wearing a Murray State shirt. How about a guy who has hundreds of millions of followers just on a daily basis, putting out info about your program? That's going to help you day after day and keep this thing headed in the right direction.
Well, and you got Woj at Bonnie, you got Steph at Davidson.
Yeah.
So you've got the A10 is kind of at this focal point here, because you got Woj at Bonaventure, you got Steph at Davidson. Now all of a sudden, if John Morant winds up helping out Missouri State in some capacity, getting the brand out there.
Yeah.
You got Ja out there, and look around. John Shire said Jason Tatum's going to be helping out Duke this year. I don't know what that means, but if Jason Tatum's going to have a role in this, look at Shaq at Sacramento State.
Yeah. Damian Lillard with Weber State. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you get these NBA guys helping out, and your brand's just going to get out there. And then you're going to see that translate, hopefully, to, okay, I've heard of St. Bonaventure. Where is it at? And then you find out where it is and go, I would have never guessed that.
Right.
I want to know what Woj's master plan is, because this is a building process that he's doing.
Yes.
He's not trying to overhaul this in 1 year, snap his fingers and be a contender. Like he's got a plan, and he's got the great connections, obviously, to do so. So
no, you compare. I compare
we got to monitor
year
in, year out.
I compare it a little bit. I'm sorry for the soccer talk on a basketball show, but you look at kind of the way that takeovers happen in soccer. You got two options. You can go out and just splash cash and throw money like Chelsea has done in recent years and just buy everyone. Or you can be Newcastle. You can come in, you can evaluate the state of things, you can look at the roster, look behind the scenes at what needs to be improved, look at the infrastructure behind them. And then you can slowly carry this out, knowing that you've got resources there, knowing that you've got this powerful brand behind you that can get it done. You're not going to hit roadblocks along the way, because you're not just full force ahead, blinders on both sides, running into things. You have a clear understanding of the exact path you need to follow. And I'm real curious to see, like you said, couple years down the line, how does this continue to develop?
Well, they were picked. What were they in the preseason poll? Bonnie was picked 8th in
Yeah.
the preseason poll. What if that gets up to 5 next year?
Yeah.
I don't know. What's it going to look like this year?
Right.
See how that sets the table for next year. If Woj if he helps make a couple more splashes on the trail. Are we talking about this team being a top 4 team in 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be it's how mid majors were built. You
Yes.
tear it all down and you come up slow. And I think too, like what Ryan Pedon's done at Illinois State.
Yeah.
He took over. They weren't very good.
Exactly.
You build it, you get the guys in you want, and look what's going on down in Normal. Give it time, but if there's a guy I trust, it's Woj.
For sure. All right. Well, that concludes our kind of rundown here of the Missouri Valley and the A10. Nick, thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking more preseason hoops with us.
Fletch, always a pleasure, man. Appreciate it.
Always.